We want to look at how change in output and change in input will look graphically. So we know that we're starting at this point 3, 2, and so we know that we have assumed rate of change of negative 0.25, and so we want to know what is the corresponding change in output if we know that the change in input is a change in input of negative 5. So that means our change in input, that means we are going to change our input value by 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 units, and it's difficult with the highlighter, but we want to make it a directional arrow. Let me do this over. So again, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we're going in that direction 5 units because it's negative, and then we want its associated change in output. And if you recall, each time, so what negative 0.25 represents, so negative 0.25 over 1 is our assumed rate of change. So that means for each horizontal right movement of 1, so we can refer back to what we talked about in this problem. So each year, so for each horizontal, and we have to tell right or left now because we understood that from in context, but we have to be explicit with it when it's not in context. And then we talked about whatever happened to the output. So for each horizontal right movement of 1 unit, there is a negative or downward movement or a vertical movement downward. There is a downward movement of 0.25 units. Well, if we're going to move a total of negative 5 units, so we know that this change right here, so we know this change is equal to negative 5, then we know from our work from above, that means that we are going to either take negative 0.25 and add it 5 times, or we can take negative 5 and multiply it by the rate of change, which is negative 0.25, which is going to equal us to 1.25. So now we know that negative 5 times negative 0.25 is going to be an upward movement, because instead of going right and downward, we're going left, which means we'd have to go upward. And we're going to go up. We're going to go up 1.25 units. So this change is equal to 1.25. Now in this problem, what would the change in input and the change in output be if we had an input value of 4.2? So this time we know that the input value is 4.2, and so we're going to go up to 4.2. So we need to figure out what that change is. And so that change in input value, well, we moved 1.2 units to the right. So if I'm going to move 1.2 units to the right, I'm going to add a negative 0.25 plus 2/10 of that. Or if I just multiply those two values together, I'm going to end up with a value of negative 0.3. So my change in input, that change in input is 1.2 units, and now my change in output is going to be, I probably should have written that on the other side. Let me rewrite that. So change of input was a 1.2, and now our change in output is going to be a very small change of negative 0.3 units. Okay, so this is how our changes would look on our graph.